Welcome everyone. Today our ladies room presents open source software and the government. Speaker is Dr. Gwynn Gebeyehu. Just a little disclaimer before we get started. This talk is recorded and will be posted on YouTube on our channel at Our Ladies Room. Feel free to turn off your cameras if you don't want to be recorded. We do this to prioritize creating a safe and inclusive space for free from any form of harassment, fostering a respectful environment for everyone to learn and connect. So please remember that all our attendees are expected to adhere to our code of conduct. If you like to know a bit more about what we do in our code of conduct, you can follow this link at ladies.org/COC. Please use the chat for introducing yourself or asking questions, and most probably at the end of the Dr. Gwynn Gebeyehu talk, you can have a way asking her question directly, and then you can raise your hand and ask your questions. So what to expect from this talk? An engaging session where Dr. Gwynn Gebeyehu will delve into the transformative potential of open source software in government operations. We'll learn about the challenges and the advantages of implementing OSS, particularly in relation to machine learning, artificial intelligence, and big data. Welcome everyone again. Happy to welcome you to our October event. As I introduced myself already, my name is Federica Gazzelloni. I'm the Our Ladies Rome chapter organizer. We are thrilled to have you join us today. And so get ready for an engaging and informative experience. Just to know a bit more about us, Our Ladies is a global community with the mission of promoting the R language for empowering women at all user levels by building a collaborative global network. It is a friendly community founded in 2012 by Gabriela De Queiroz in San Francisco, and since then has grown as an international community. Our Ladies Rome is part of Our Ladies Global, a local chapter dedicated to promoting inclusivity in the R language community, and we organize monthly meetings to provide a platform to discuss current trends and hot topics in R. And not only that. So Our Ladies Rome in numbers, now even Our Ladies Rome is quite well recognized within the community, the open source community. Since January 2023, we reached 1K plus members on Meetup and more than 1,600 reservation and 20 plus event organizers. So if you like to, we will be very happy if you like to have more information about us. You can join and please visit our website at ourladiesrome.org. If you like to contribute to our Rome chapter or even being a co-organizer, you can let us know. I'll put this in the chat. You can fill up the form and we will get in touch. The team is composed of me, Raffaella, and Silvana Costa. We are an international team, so very happy. We enjoy our organizer meetings every month. So our calendar is for this year has been quite interesting. So we had the insights on reproducible publication with using Quarto. We led workshop building a chatbot. We debugged R and explore how to deploy a model with vetiver and pins packages. Then discussed about geospatial data And finally, we had the pleasure to have Adli Weekend talking about about art in production. So the second half was a bit more like focus on art as well, building website, quarter dashboard, and we went forward with an advanced event with Bruno Rodriguez. And then we had a little practice event with making data wrangling practices with R. And finally, today, we are joined by Dr. Gwynn Gebeyehu talking about open source softwares and e-government. So we expect to have more for the end of this year. So next event will be with Julia Stewart Lowndes. And we will be talking about NASA Open Escapes and a bit more in deep about some interesting heuristics, thoughts about open sources. And so stay tuned. We will publish about that a bit more very soon. Then the leader of our open science, Yarina Bellini Saibene, and Ellie Older. About this will be a side of an art talk about talking about art, but we will be talking about data visualization. So stay tuned because we will tell you more about our next event. Then I'll put these other two links in the chat if you like to propose a speaker or being called as a speaker. If you'd like to join us as a speaker. So we'll be very happy to have you. So finally, we are excited to welcome Dr. Gwynn Gebeyehu, postdoctoral fellow at Harvard Business School, specializing in the science of science, with a PhD in statistics from University of Auckland. She has made significant contribution to analytical projects in the rail and aviation sectors. Dr. Gebeyehu expertise includes improving predictive algorithms and developing application for unbiased outcomes. Today, she will discuss the pivotal role of open source software in transforming government operations. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Gwynn Gebeyehu.
Hi everyone. It's a beautiful day. I'm just outside Washington, D.C., and I wanted to thank Federica and Rafaela for organizing this and for inviting me to speak. Before I start sharing slides, I'll just tell you a little bit more about me. I did a PhD at the University of Auckland in the stats department there, and I don't know if many of you know that that's where R was actually invented. It was actually founded there. It actually started in that department. Hadley Wickham did his master's there and then went to the University of Iowa where he did his PhD with Di Cook. And so I have the privilege of working with many our core team members and working with them. After that, I did some academic work at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, as well as Harvard Business School, and some government contracting. And then I lectured at Wharton Business School, and now I'm transforming government, so to speak. It's the IRS. I'm at the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. We're the organization in the U.S. government that collects taxes, and the IRS has been around since I think 1862, and the necessity of transforming an organization that's been around since 1862 to turn it into being an AI forward organization is something that's really interesting to me and something that I feel that I'm participating in. So let's talk a little bit about my work there. And let me go play. And then so this is the and let me just also mention that none of this work has anything to do with is the opinion of anyone in the federal government. Just as a disclaimer, this is my personal opinion completely. That is why there is no IRS logo on any of these slides. This is just my experience there and that I'm sharing with you. So let's start. So let me just start by saying the government, in the Western world, I think it's fair to say, but all over the world, government is a really important organization. It it ensures that the typical skill sets that a government should produce are ensuring that people feel safe, feel secure, the roads work, and many of the things that are required for a productive society to be functional is the job of the government. So, and we share a lot of information with the government. So, I'm just going to start with a quick squit from the movie The Matrix. So I'm not sure, probably most of you have seen it, but I'm just going to bring this to your attention again. Hopefully I can get it to play.
Hello, Neo.
How do you know that name?
I know a lot about you.
Who are you?
My name is Trinity.
Trinity. The Trinity? That cracked the IRS base.
That was a long time ago.
Jesus.
What?
I just thought, you were a guy.
So that's all I wanted to share with you, right? So now I'm at the IRS and I have seen this movie many times. In fact, the first Matrix was a movie that I used to watch on a weekly basis. I just loved it so much. And I was always under the impression that the heroes of the movie were Trinity and Neo. And of course, Trinity's the one that cracked the IRS base. So now I find that they are not the good people, right? These are the people that we have to take care of. And when you work in government, this kind of security is a huge issue, right? So we have so much information about every single citizen, and in order for government to function, we must maintain security with the data, and we must you must trust us to do what you need us to do, right? So security, there's all kinds of personal information, right? In our database about wages, in other data, just all kinds of personal information that we must keep safe. That has to be our primary objective, really, is to keep this safe. There's bank information in there. There's health information. So the Center for Medicaid Services, which is a group of people that I work with or I'm familiar with, they have all of the records of U.S. citizens. So security has to be really, really, really a top priority. And you can imagine with all this information in it, it's a very, very attractive target for someone who wants to get access to this kind of data. And so we have to be extremely, extremely careful. And that is something that the IRS has dealt with. Recently, we had a contractor named Little John. I think he was from Deloitte. I'm not sure, but he's now in jail because he shared some tax returns, some 1040s from some very important people that made a lot of money, including Jeff Bezos. And so that has to be one of our primary concerns. Now, let's think a little bit about elected officials. Now, who do we have in government that can keep our data secure? Well, there's a number of people, right? There's a lot of people, but really one of the people who is most responsible for that is elected officials. Now, what kind of skill sets do these elected officials have, right? So they study political science, right? And I just Googled to figure out, what kind of things do you need to study if you want to work in government and to work as, a senator or a congressperson. They work in political science, public administration, economics, business administration, public policy, law, right? So these are the kind of people that they have. And so there's this disconnect, right, between what these elected officials know and then keeping the data secure. And so you end up with situations like this. So this is a hearing with Sundar Pichai, I think. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce his name. But here we have these elected officials asking the head of Google questions. And let's just hear what kind of questions they have. If I can go on. Oops, and that's the wrong one. Here we
If I move from here and go over there and sit with my Democrat friends, which will make them real nervous, does Google track my movement? Does Google, through this phone, know that I have moved here and moved over to the left?
Not by default. There may be a Google service which you've opted in to use, and if...
So Google knows that I am moving over there. It's not a trick question. You make $100 million a year, you ought to be able to answer that question. Does Google know through this phone that I am moving over there and sit next to Mr. Johnson? It's yes or no.
I wouldn't be able to answer without looking at...
You can't say yes or no.
Without knowing more details.
Yes or no?
I genuinely don't know without knowing
I'm
what
shocked
services.
you don't know. I think Google obviously does.
Would you agree to allow an independent entity to study your search results for political bias? I know you have individuals studying that now, but you appointed them. Would you allow a third-party, independent, outside organization to study your search results and cooperate with them to determine the degree, or if any, of political bias?
To date, there have been independent third-party studies looking at search results. The Economist did.
But you chose those third parties. I'm talking about someone truly independent.
We didn't choose those third parties. I mean, they completed those studies.
If you Google the word idiot under images, a picture of Donald Trump comes up. I just did that. How would that happen? How does search work so that that would occur? For
any time you type in a keyword, we've gone out and crawled and stored billion copies of.
So I think you understand, right? So these people have no training in algorithms, in software. They just don't have that information. And the people who advise them often don't have that skill set either. And so there's a big disconnect, right, between what happens in at the government, right? We have these a legislative body that has this skill set, right? And then, but what they also need to watch out for security. And so there's this very big disconnect. And in the middle is are these public servants that are trying to keep things up to date, so to speak, right? And so one of the examples where how this disconnect can manifest itself is in the healthcare.gov disaster. So in 2016, we elected Obama as a president. One of his signature issues was that he wanted for every American to have access to healthcare, right? There was a humongous disaster when the policy that was written became implemented, right? When they implemented it. And on the first day, I think it was November 1st, 2018, that healthcare.gov was live. The website was live. It was a website that people were trying to sign up for. Only 8 people were able to sign up for it, right? And so there's this huge disconnect, right? And I'm just going to go a little bit about talk, excuse me, see if I can get this to play.
Well, we're going to turn now to the latest on Obamacare and the debacle. The White House promising the new federal health insurance website will be fully fixed, but it will take weeks. The problems, and there are dozens of them at healthcare.gov, are much worse than we've been told. And ABC's Jeff Zeleny has the details from the White House. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Bianna. The White House is finally hitting reboot, now saying this very troubled website will be ready, but not until the end of next month.
In his weekly address this morning, President Obama offering a blunt admission about the failures in his signature healthcare law.
As you may have heard, the site isn't working the way it's supposed to yet.
The White House acknowledging the full scope of problems with its beleaguered healthcare.gov website. The administration is hiring a new troubleshooter, promising by November 30th to fix the errors. The president, embarrassed and angry, trying to downplay the setback.
Some people have poked fun at me that
So I'm just stopping that. But you can see that there's a big disconnect between what is legislated at Congress, what the government signs, and then there's a huge and then what the public actually has and what the public gets. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about how open source software, as well as and software practices in general, about how to deal with that. But before I do that, I just want to talk a little bit more about tax law and the complexity. I'm at the IRS, so I'm going to talk a little bit about tax law. So here we have.
Well, we're going to turn now to the latest.
That was not what I wanted to do. And, tax law is extremely complex, right? Looks like it was started in the 1920s, and we have over 70,000 pages of standard federal tax report, right? So this is a big, right? And you can see that it grows over time. I'm sorry, I can't figure out where my mouse is, which makes it very challenging for me I don't have a pointer, but you can see that it grows over time. So it looks like there was initially something written in 1910, about 1940, they wrote a whole, right? You can see it's kind of a step function that it goes up, and they just write more and more regulations, so to speak, or policies and procedures, right? And it increases over time. So and what happens with this is that you have a whole bunch of regulations. You write code for it, right? You're trying to solve the problem and you write code for it. And then some more regulations come, and so you write more code for it, right? And then, right? And so it's not, and you just end up with more and more code that's kind of written all over each other. And that is right, because when software is broken, you build more software, right? And when the tax system is broken, you build more regulations. And so it's this big kind of issue of having what we would call spaghetti code, right? Where everything is just kind of all on top of each other and everything's disconnected, right? And so this is what you come in as a civil servant. This is how what you experience. You come in and there's this very kind of disjointed idea of how to implement policies. So unfortunately, there are people who have come before me who have dealt with this issue. One of them is Jennifer Palka. She's really a wonderful person. She founded Code for America and was also one of the people to step in. There was a number of people who stepped in and reworked healthcare.gov, right? So and so it's a terrific example of how we need people with really keen coding abilities and as well as user experience to be able to work in government and to improve the services, right? Because a lot of what happens in government is this kind of thing, right? So the way that procurement happens is that the government, you have these legislators, people in Congress, they think about procurement and buying things as very similar to, buying a chair, right? So if you're building a model or you're building a system, what they think needs to be done, and historically, what they think needs to be done is that you bring in a contractor, the contractor builds it for you, and then the contractor leaves, right? So you can't imagine, a company like Google who runs the search results in for their website. You can't imagine the Google web search team coming in, right, building a model to find search results and then letting it go, right? Like letting the people go who built it and say that's done, right? As people who build software and people who build models, we know very clearly that you're constantly refining it and improving it and looking for trends and updating it, right? That there's a cyclical process by which software is developed and algorithms are developed. You get a new user interface, you test, you constantly test, and you constantly iterate, right? And so the people who are involved in public science, political science, public policy, they don't have that sense, right? So that's one of the lessons from that book that I wanted to share. And but the issue is that the government performs really, really essential services. So I love this quote from Jennifer Pelka. She says, "Government is who shows up," right? And it's who is in the room to make those decisions at that time. And it's really important to have people who have critical skills and are really passionate about performing for their fellow human beings in government. So one example of this is COVID-19. And so this is all historical, right? So COVID-19 is, I'm sure most of you went through this. We had a huge, and we had basically everything was shut down. And one of the issues that had to be addressed at this time was the California unemployment, right? So everyone had to stay at home, and there was a huge amount of issues with everyone, who was at home and was laid off, applied for unemployment benefits. So one of the problems with the California unemployment issue is that there is a certain amount of people who were automatically processed, right? And then there's people who weren't automatically processed. And the people who weren't automatically processed needed a person to come in and read up on the application and be able to send it out on its way. Unfortunately, that was all spaghetti code, right? And it's all written actually in COBOL, which COBOL is something that I don't know about. It's a language that I understand was written in 1958. So it's a very old language, but it has spaghetti code and it's COBOL, right? And so and the other problem with unemployment benefits is that it's been around since 1935, right? So you can imagine it's almost 100 years old. How many different iterations, right? Like I showed the tax code, how many different iterations of this unemployment benefit has gone through. You've not only has the legislative branch written it, but there's also been judicial stuff that has been included. And so it's this very much, like I talked about earlier, this very much a spaghetti code. So there was a metric that they were concerned about, which is that some of these calls were not being processed in time. Some of the applications weren't being processed in time. And so what did they do, right? Well, there were a number of things that they did and that the legislature tried to do to address this issue, because it was all over the news, right? And one of their big concerns was that there weren't enough people to process the calls, right? The problem is that learning the system that was so messy took 25 years. It really took 25 years to understand how to process the calls, right? So this is an example that Jennifer Palka talks about in her book, Recoding America. And the team came in from Code for America, and they were talking with someone who was there. I don't remember the name of the person. And that person kept saying, well, I'm new. So let me see. I need to go talk to someone who's a little bit more experienced. So, I mean, just in the chat, guess how many years experience do you think this person had who was new? Or you can unmute yourselves. I'm gonna 10 years, 20 years. $10 years. So the problem, that person who was new had actually been there 17 years. So they had been there 17 years. Oh, I have to click on this. 17 years was new, right? So they'd only been there 17 years, and it just took so long for them to understand the process that they didn't know. They had to go back and ask people who had been there for a really long time. And of course, the government, what did they want to do? They were like, well, we need to help these people. So how can we do it? Well, they hired 5,000 new employees, except for the what? What happened if you hire new employees? What do you have to do? The first thing you have to do is train them on the system, right? And the training takes 25 years. So all of the people who knew the system were in charge of training these people, which actually had the impact of lowering the number of calls of things that were processed, right? So it's this really complicated interface, and it actually, the metric that they wanted to reduce, they actually increased it. And the reason that they did that is because they didn't with the with the leaders in that field. And so it's a very these are complicated processes. They're complicated formats to interface with, and it's really, really important that we think carefully and interface carefully with civil servants before we attempt to fix whatever problem we think they're going through. So here's another example that I really like from her book. She calls it concrete boats. This is something that keeps coming up in the book, where she talks about concrete boats. And the outline of this is that people in the government are rewarded for implementing policy, right? They're not necessarily rewarded for having an effective outcome, right? And so this has to do with the Veterans Benefit Management System. And at this time, there were a number of veterans. So veterans are people who've worked in the military, and now they're discharged, and they have benefits, right? Like medical insurance and all this stuff. And there was a website that they were they were building, and they were trying to work on improving this website. Now, why is this a really critical skill set? Why is this critical infrastructure? Well, at that time, the military, there were 18 on average, 18 completed suicides per day. So it's, clearly, and part of that is because it was just, they could not get access to the appropriate healthcare, mental health care, or anything that they needed, right? And that was because the website was broken, right? Whereas the people who were at the VA, it's called the Veterans Administration, didn't think that there was any problem and thought that everyone was getting what they needed because and they were processing people quickly because their people could not get through the website. They could not get through the front door, right? And they had a huge latency issue with the website. Every time you clicked on something, it would take a very long time to go to the next page, right? We're used to that being almost automatic. You click on something, you go to the link, you click next, and it goes automatically. Well, they brought in a team from Code for America to address this, and their first meeting with the director, they said, well, I'm so glad you've come in, we really don't have any problems. And so they're trying to figure out, how do you not have any problems when, people aren't getting in, da, 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 da. What ended up happening is that someone redefined latency for if it's less than 2 minutes. So meaning if you clicked next and it waited 1 minute and 59 seconds, right? Then everything was okay. So and so he changed the policy so that he changed the policy so that they didn't have to move to address this issue, right? And so if they decided that it was fixed, they changed the policy or the guidelines, then if it doesn't work, it's not our fault. And of course there's a benefit in this, right? Because it's very easy for something that goes wrong to get, for it to go on the news. And then, for example, the California unemployment benefit, they started pulling people in to speak with the state legislature in California. And all these people at that time really should have been fixing things, but they couldn't. They had to go in and prep to talk to these Congress people or, state Congress people. And so there is kind of this, what do you do? What do you do to help and to hold people accountable, but at the same time to get what fellow citizens might need. And so if they implement the policies and procedures, which is how she came up with the concrete boat issue. If they asked you to build a concrete boat, would you do so? And the director said, yes, I would do so because I don't want to be responsible for the outcome. Then it's someone else's fault, right? And so that's one of the issues that we're sorry about this. That's one of the issues that we're dealing with. Okay. Okay, so here's another example that came up, which was this issue of marijuana expungement, right? So if in the US, if you have I'm not sure if it's a felony, I think it's a felony, right? If you have some kind of conviction, you're not allowed to vote. It's harder to get jobs. And in California, they legalized marijuana, which meant that all of the legal all of these felonies should now not be felonies. They should be reduced, and it should be easier for people to get housing, for people to get jobs, and for people to vote. So it used to be when there used to be kind of a year-long process. You had to go to this paper, to this part of the government to get your record here. You had to go to state government. It was a very long process, which meant that no one was taking advantage of it, which meant that there was a whole subpopulation in places where marijuana had been legalized that was not being served as they should be served as citizens. And so what happened is that, there were 1 million forms that needed to be filled out, and you needed to get the documentation here. And it was a really, really long process, and you had to have the right kind of skill sets to do that. But what they realized eventually is that actually this marijuana expungement, it was just a database. And all you had to do was change one field in the database, right? And so it didn't even need to be a form. They just went to the database and changed one field, and then they expunged everyone's records. So a really important lesson. Does there need to be a form? And I'm not sure that that there does need to be a form for every single thing that we do. Sometimes I think, you know, we can just take responsibility, take ownership, and do it. And so here's another quote from someone else who I really appreciate. This is Yadira Sanchez, and she's kind of one of the heroes in the book. And this is an example. Excuse me. This is an example of one of this was after she worked at the Center for Medicaid Services, or Medicare. I'm actually really not sure. But anyway, so she works in health, and one of the and she worked on healthcare.gov. She worked to rescue and save healthcare.gov. And her next project after healthcare.gov was to fill out forms from physicians, right? So physicians have to, if they see someone that's on Medicare, they have to fill out paperwork. And it's a horrible process. And they got funding to update these forms. And, you know, there were like, in the policy, right, there were like 20 different definitions of physician group. You could either be your own one physician, you know, like you have your own doctor. You could be a group, or you could be, you know, there were like 9 or 10 different definitions, and that was what the policy required. The issue is that it was unintelligible for a person to determine what it was that these different definitions were. So a normal physician who's trying to fill out the form would not know how to answer the questions. And this is something that she kept saying to these people. I get that it's complicated, but it has to make sense to a person. And she was able to do this to make the form much better, and to get physicians reimbursed for work that they did for people that were enrolled in Medicare. So what's the take-home message for all of this? And this is a talk from actually it's a quote from a talk from that a friend of mine, actually is someone that I went to college with. I don't know if I would still say he's a friend, but I did go to college with him. And he gave this talk recently that talks about the interface between these software companies, which is that oftentimes the IT contractors there's no incentive to produce something that is simple, that does the work, and that is cheap, right? And that is where I think open source software can come in. Because, you know, for example, a lot of what we call COTS products, which is commercial off the shelf, COTS products are basically open source software that have kind of been packaged up, right? The problem with that is that then you're being charged a lot of money for it, but you also can't interface with the developers, right? Like if I have something that's broke, you know, it's an R product. I'll just bring this up. I had something that happened at Wharton Business School. I was working in Quarto. I was teaching a course, and I was asking the students to use Quarto, and we had problems with it. Well, I could go to GitHub, submit an issue, and say, my students are having this problem. Someone else came a week later, Amelia McNamara, you may know her. She came and said, my students are having the same issue. They had it fixed overnight, right? And so you don't have this kind of interface with the developers that you have when you're working with open source software, okay? So this is Paul Smith. He's one of the people that went into rescue healthcare.gov. And he gave a talk here. I don't think it's a 40-minute talk. We don't have the time to go through it, but I wanted to add it to the slide because I think he talks a lot about the future of an improved government that's more nimble, that uses open source software and doesn't just rely on, that red chair that I said, we will buy it once and then not update it. And so here's, I'm not going to go through it.
How many people here know what the U.S. Digital Service is? You've heard of it. Okay, about 60%. And
yeah, so the U.S. Digital Service is a group of people who are attempting to infiltrate other departments and divisions of the U.S. government and use agile thinking, user-centered thinking, and open source software all throughout.
And how many people here know what the USDS does, what its mission is? Okay, a little less. I'll talk a little bit about that. At any rate, there's a great moment in the article where, so essentially USDS is trying to reform government from the inside when it comes to building technology, building software. And they actually had a hearing on the Hill not too long ago. And there were lobbyists from the incumbent technology companies there. And there's this quote in the article. It said, "The lobbyists represented the interests of the traditional IT contractors seem to believe it is their right to overcharge taxpayers for complex computer systems that don't work." And when I heard that, I immediately thought that's a great, perfect, concise, sweet summary for what we do at Ad Hoc, except the complete opposite of every one of those words. So
yeah, so this is what, this is the issue with government, right? Is that people see us as revenue producers as opposed to actually doing the simplest things, right? So that's, he does a talk here. I'm just, I watched it, but I don't want to include it. And then here's one of the biggest successes in open source software recently in the government, which is the direct file. So in the US, everyone has to file software on file their taxes on April 15. And direct file is a small pilot program where some like 12 or 15 states, if you lived in, and I think they're working now to include more states. But a lot of it, actually the back end, I know some of it is, and the data processing, some of it is written in R. I know the people who are working on it. And the purpose of direct file is to make it simpler and cheaper, free, 100% free for Americans to file taxes, as opposed to, I think right now it's I want to say a $5 billion industry, right? We go to, I'm not even sure where we go, but there's a lot of online ways to file your taxes online that, cost a lot of money, and there's no reason that the U.S. government shouldn't be able to establish and build a system that works efficiently and effectively. And it's extremely successful, and it's also extremely contentious because, as you can imagine, the contractors or the people who build these, who have websites where it costs $150 for someone to file their taxes, they're very upset about it. But I think it's working really well, and I'm really proud to be part of an organization that is trying to reduce the burden on the user, on the citizens. So I'll just end with a quote from Winston Churchill. And this was in World War II. And at the end of it, he said, "Americans can always be trusted to do the right thing once all other possibilities have been exhausted." But, I think that trust in government is something that a lot of civil servants are very aware of and wanting to focus on, and hopeful that that we can kind of re-earn or re-earn, or maybe earn, the ability to to serve our citizens and our fellow human beings in a more with an experience that's more user friendly.
Thank you. Please, if you have any questions for Gwynn, please unmute yourself or put in the chat. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. I didn't expect it, so I imagined that it was something similar, but I didn't expect something like that. That was very great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.